Rapist professor assaults victim Ana Costa, 18, at São Paulo Private Academy. In the shadowed halls of São Paulo's elite private academy, where privilege masked darker impulses, the unthinkable unfolded under the guise of education as renowned professor. Progressive ideals descended into a nightmare of violation that shattered lives and exposed the rot beneath the surface of academic power. What began as an ordinary literature class on a humid afternoon spiraled into a brutal assault that left young Ana Costa broken and the entire institution reeling from the screams that echoed through closed doors. This is the story of unchecked authority twisted into something monstrous, where a trusted mentor became a predator and an innocent student paid the ultimate price in a saga that would ignite public fury across Brazil. The academy, nestled in the upscale neighborhoods of São Paulo, stood as a beacon for the city's brightest young minds, its marble corridors and state-of-the-art classrooms promising futures filled with opportunity. Yet on that fateful day, it became the stage for one of the most horrifying crimes imaginable. Paulo Freire, 58 years old with salt-and-pepper hair and a commanding presence that had earned him tenure and adulation from colleagues and students alike, had long been seen as a champion of critical pedagogy. His lectures, drawing crowds eager to absorb his words on liberation and justice. But behind the intellectual facade lurked a man consumed by dark desires, power, and control that he could no longer suppress. Ana Costa, just 18, fresh out of high school, with dreams of becoming a writer herself, was the epitome of youthful promise. Her long, dark hair cascading. Over her shoulders, bright, curious eyes reflecting the vibrant energy of someone stepping into adulthood with hope and determination. She had enrolled in Freire's advanced literature seminar, excited to explore the texts that challenged societal norms, little knowing that her enthusiasm would mark her as a target for his depraved intentions. The classroom on the third floor overlooking the manicured gardens was filled with the usual chatter of 20 students, notebooks, open laptops humming as they prepared for another session of intellectual discourse. Freire entered with his characteristic swagger, closing the heavy wooden door behind him, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Ana, seated in the front row. Her uniform skirt neatly pressed her blouse, accentuating her youthful figure. He began the lecture as always, his voice booming with passion, dissecting themes of oppression and resistance. But his gaze kept drifting back to her, lingering too long on the curve of her neck, the way she bit her lip in concentration. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with unspoken tension that only Ana seemed to sense as she shifted uncomfortably in her seat, crossing her legs and focusing intently on her notes. The other students remained oblivious, absorbed in their professor's words, unaware of the storm brewing within him. Freire paused mid-sentence, his hand gripping the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening as he announced a special one-on-one discussion for Ana. After class, claiming her recent essay showed exceptional promise that warranted private feedback. The class murmured with a mix of envy and indifference as the bell rang, signaling the end of the period, students filing out one by one, until only Ana remained, her heart pounding with a mix of flattered excitement and vague unease. She approached his desk, clutching her backpack strapped tightly, as he locked the classroom door with a soft click that echoed like a death knell. "Sit down, Ana," he said, his tone shifting from mentor to something far more sinister, his eyes darkening with lust as he circled around behind her. What followed was a timeline of terror that unfolded in agonizing slow motion. Freire's hands suddenly upon her shoulders, pushing her down onto the desk with surprising strength, his breath hot against her ear as he whispered twisted justifications about power dynamics and forbidden knowledge. Ana's protests turned to cries for help as he tore at her uniform, the fabric ripping under his aggressive grasp. her body pinned beneath his weight in the very space meant for learning and growth. The meaningful violation stretched over what felt like an eternity to her, but mere minutes in reality, his grunts and her muffled screams filling the empty classroom as he assaulted her with ruthless abandon, ignoring her pleas and the tears streaming down her face. He forced himself upon her completely, the act brutal and devoid of any humanity, his once revered intellect reduced to primal savagery in that isolated room where no one could hear her suffering. The desk creaked under their struggle papers scattering across the floor as Anna fought back with every ounce of strength, her nails scratching at his arms, drawing blood that only seemed to fuel his rage. Freire's rampage continued, unchecked, his hands roaming, violating every boundary as he claimed her innocence in the most heinous way possible. The professor who preached liberation, becoming the ultimate oppressor in that moment of pure evil. As the assault reached its horrifying climax, Anna's world shattered into fragments of pain and betrayal, the vibrant future she envisioned crumbling under the weight of his body and his betrayal. Yet even in her agony, she clung to a sliver of resolve, vowing silently that this would not be the end of her story, but the beginning of a fight for justice that would expose him to the world. The classroom, which had once symbolized enlightenment, now stood as a chamber of nightmares, stained with evidence of the crime that would soon ripple outward with devastating force. The classroom, which had once symbolized enlightenment, now stood as a chamber of nightmares, stained with evidence of the crime that would soon ripple outward with devastating force. Anna lay there trembling on the cold floor, her clothes torn and scattered, her body aching with violation. As Freire stood over her, adjusting his disheveled clothes, a twisted smirk playing on his lips, as if he had just delivered a particularly insightful lecture, rather than committing an atrocity that would haunt her forever. She gathered what little strength remained, forcing herself to stand on shaky legs, grabbing her backpack and bolting for the door. Her screams finally breaking free as she burst into the hallway, echoing through the academy's corridors like a siren of alarm that could no longer be ignored. Witnesses, nearby students, and a janitor rushing toward the commotion caught glimpses of the aftermath, Anna's disheveled appearance, tear-streaked face, and the professor emerging moments later with a fabricated story of a fainting spell. But the evidence was undeniable: bloody scratches on his arms, disarrayed furniture, and, most damningly, the security footage from the hallway camera that captured her desperate escape and his predatory pursuit in the minutes leading up to the assault. Word spread like wildfire through the academy phones, buzzing with frantic messages as students and staff pieced together the horror from Anna's broken statements to the arriving security guards who immediately detained Freire, despite his protests of innocence, claiming it was all a misunderstanding between consenting adults, which only fueled the growing outrage. The footage reviewed in the headmaster's office revealed the locked door, the prolonged isolation, and Anna's visible resistance, painting a clear picture of the rapist's calculated, sick rampage that left no room for doubt in the minds of those who saw it. Ana Costa, the 18-year-old victim, was a bright star in her community, raised in a modest family in São Paulo's bustling suburbs. She had excelled academically, winning scholarships to the private academy, where she hoped to forge a path toward literary greatness. Her passion for writing evident in every essay and poem she crafted with heartfelt sincerity. With her infectious smile and gentle demeanor, she was beloved by friends who described her as the girl who lit up rooms with her curiosity and kindness. Never imagining that her trust in educators would lead to such profound betrayal at the hands of a man society had elevated to guru status. As news of the assault broke through, leaked details and eyewitness accounts, public outrage erupted across São Paulo, with students organizing spontaneous protests outside the academy gates, waving signs demanding justice, and the immediate firing of not just Freire, but a full investigation into the institution's handling of complaints. Social media exploded with hashtags like Justice for Ana and Max Expose, the professor, trending nationwide as parents pulled their children from classes and alumni voiced their disgust at the Academy's initial slow response, which included a vague statement about conducting an internal review rather than condemning the crime. Outright, protesters clashed with security as crowds swelled, chanting for accountability. The school's prestigious reputation crumbling under the weight of scandal, as media vans descended upon the scene, broadcasting interviews with shaken students who recounted Freire's increasingly erratic behavior in recent months. Subtle advances toward female pupils that had been dismissed as mere eccentricity. The headmaster faced mounting pressure, issuing a belated suspension of Freire pending police investigation, while activists called for his arrest on charges of rape and abuse of authority. The evidence mounting with medical examinations confirming Ana's trauma and forensic traces linking directly to the professor. Freire's past began to unravel in the frenzy, with former students coming forward, alleging similar patterns of grooming and harassment that had been silenced by non-disclosure agreements and institutional protectionism, exposing a systemic failure that allowed his sick rampage to reach its violent peak. Ana, meanwhile, was rushed to a hospital under police escort. Her family by her side, offering support as she recounted the harrowing details in interviews that humanized her suffering and galvanized the movement for change, with her resilience shining through even in the darkest hours, inspiring others to break their silence. The reaction extended far beyond the academy walls, reaching government officials and women's rights groups who demanded reforms in educational institutions to prevent such abuses of power. The call for justice growing louder with each passing hour as petitions gathered thousands of signatures, and candlelight vigils illuminated the streets in solidarity with the young victim. Yet, amid the chaos, Freire remained defiant from his holding cell, issuing statements through his lawyer, portraying himself as the victim of a witch hunt and consensual role play gone awry, a narrative that only intensified the public's fury and highlighted the deep divides in how society viewed authority figures. As investigations deepened, uncovering more witnesses and digital evidence of Freire's predatory communications, the story evolved into a national reckoning, forcing the academy to shut its doors temporarily and promising full cooperation with authorities, while Ana's profile as a symbol of survival rather than mere victimhood began to emerge, her voice gaining strength in private as she prepared to face the legal battles ahead. The ripples of this one classroom assault threatened to dismantle careers, reputations, and the very foundations of trust in São Paulo's educational elite, setting the stage for revelations that would shake the city to its core and leave no one untouched by the aftermath of Paulo Freire's unforgivable betrayal. The ripples of this one classroom assault threatened to dismantle careers, reputations, and the very foundations of trust in São Paulo's educational elite, setting the stage for revelations that would shake the city to its core and leave no one untouched by the aftermath of Paulo Freire's unforgivable betrayal. In the weeks following the incident, the private academy became a fortress under siege, as investigators swarmed the premises, seizing computers, hard drives, and records that revealed a pattern of ignored complaints spanning years where Freire's influence had shielded him from consequences, allowing his depravity to fester unchecked until it exploded in that fateful assault on Ana Costa. Public protests intensified, with thousands marching through the streets of São Paulo, carrying banners emblazoned with Ana's name and demands for harsher penalties on predatory educators. The air filled with chants that drowned out any attempts at institutional damage control as celebrities and politicians weighed in amplifying the scandal to international headlines. Freire's arrest finally came after mounting evidence, including DNA samples from the crime scene, and multiple victim testimonies that painted him not as a misunderstood intellectual, but as a serial predator whose sick rampage had claimed more than one innocent soul, his once adoring colleagues distancing themselves rapidly as the full extent of his actions came to light in court documents that detailed grooming tactics, manipulation, and outright violence. Ana Costa emerged as a beacon of courage, her victim profile transforming from shattered student to powerful advocate as she shared her story in carefully worded statements, emphasizing the need for systemic change. Her 18 years of life now marked by both profound trauma and an unyielding determination to ensure no other girl endured the same horror in the name of education. The reactions poured in from every corner, with women's organizations staging massive rallies outside government buildings calling for immediate legislative reforms to protect students and impose mandatory background checks on faculty, while the Academy's board faced lawsuits from outraged parents whose trust had been irreparably broken by the failure to act on earlier warning signs. Media coverage dissected every aspect of the case, with forensic experts analyzing the timeline of the meaningful rape in excruciating detail from the moment Freire locked the door to the brutal minutes of violation that left physical and emotional scars on Ana that would linger for years. The footage played in closed sessions, but described in graphic terms that horrified the nation and fueled calls for his maximum sentence. Protests turned into sustained campaigns, with encampments forming near the Academy gates where survivors shared stories of similar abuses, creating a chorus of voices that could no longer be silenced, exposing the dark underbelly of power imbalances in elite institutions where professors like Freire wielded godlike authority over vulnerable young minds. The school administration scrambled to issue apologies and implement new safety protocols, but it was too little too late as enrollment plummeted and donations dried up, turning the once prestigious academy into a symbol of betrayal and institutional negligence that haunted São Paulo's social circles. Freire's defense team attempted to discredit Ana, portraying her as a willing participant in some twisted fantasy, but the overwhelming evidence, including her immediate medical report and eyewitness accounts from students who heard the screams, dismantled their arguments piece by piece, leaving the rapist professor isolated and exposed in the glare of public judgment. As the legal proceedings advanced toward trial, the city buzzed with anticipation and tension. Ana, supported by therapists and family, began the long process of healing, while channeling her pain into writing powerful essays that resonated deeply with readers across Brazil, transforming her personal nightmare into a catalyst for broader societal reflection on consent authority and the protection of youth. Reactions from the international community added further pressure, with human rights groups monitoring the case and offering support, highlighting how such incidents reflected deeper cultural issues in academic environments worldwide. Yet in São Paulo, the focus remained intensely local, as protests grew more fervent, demanding not just justice for Ana, but a complete overhaul of how complaints were handled to prevent future sick rampages by those in positions of trust. The evidence continued to mount, with digital footprints revealing Freire's obsessive messages to Ana prior to the assault and witness statements from colleagues who admitted turning a blind eye due to his academic stature, creating a damning portrait of complicity that implicated the entire system. Ana's resilience shone brightly in interviews where she spoke with quiet strength about reclaiming her narrative and fighting for others, her profile evolving into that of a young hero whose courage inspired legislative hearings and policy changes aimed at safeguarding students from predatory educators. Yet the road to full accountability was fraught with challenges, as Freire's supporters, a vocal minority of ideologues, attempted to spin the narrative in his favor, claiming political persecution, but their efforts only backfired, intensifying the outrage and solidifying public resolve to see the rapist professor face the full weight of the law. The Academy's response remained mired in controversy, with half-hearted reforms failing to quell the protests that now symbolized a larger fight against systemic abuse. The air thick with tension as the trial date approached, promising explosive testimonies and revelations that would further unravel the threads of deception. In this charged atmosphere, Ana prepared herself mentally for the courtroom battles ahead. Her story no longer just one of victimhood, but of empowerment and the unyielding pursuit of justice that promised to reshape educational landscapes for generations to come, while the city held its breath, awaiting the next chapter in this saga of betrayal and redemption. In this charged atmosphere, Ana prepared herself mentally for the courtroom battles ahead. Her story no longer just one of victimhood, but of empowerment and the unyielding pursuit of justice that promised to reshape educational landscapes for generations to come, while the city held its breath, awaiting the next chapter in this saga of betrayal and redemption. The trial of Paulo Freire became a spectacle that gripped São Paulo and beyond, with packed galleries and live broadcasts dissecting every detail of his sick rampage, from the initial grooming to the brutal assault in the classroom, where he had violated Ana Costa in the most intimate and devastating manner imaginable. His defense crumbling under cross-examination, as prosecutors presented irrefutable evidence, including the screams captured on adjacent audio feeds, the physical trauma documented by doctors, and the psychological devastation that left the 18-year-old survivor forever changed, yet resolute. Freire took the stand in a final, desperate bid to salvage his legacy, spinning tales of mutual passion and academic exploration. But his words rang hollow against the mountain of testimonies from other victims who described similar patterns of manipulation and abuse, exposing him as a monster cloaked in intellectual robes whose rampage had poisoned the very essence of trust in education. The jury deliberated for hours amid public vigils and protests that surrounded the courthouse, with chants for justice echoing through the night as Ana sat with her family, her quiet dignity inspiring waves of support from across the nation that transformed her personal horror into a rallying cry for reform. The verdict came down like a thunderclap, guilty on all counts of rape, assault, and abuse of authority, with the judge delivering a scathing condemnation of Freire's actions and the institutional failures that enabled them, sentencing him to decades behind bars, where his once celebrated name would fade into infamy as a cautionary tale of power corrupted. Public outrage reached its zenith in the aftermath, with massive celebrations in the streets mingling with tears of relief as Ana's courage was celebrated in editorials and social campaigns that pushed through new laws mandating stricter oversight in private academies and mandatory training on consent and boundaries for all educators. The ripples extending far beyond São Paulo to influence national policy on protecting vulnerable students. The academy itself underwent a complete transformation, with new leadership implementing sweeping changes, including anonymous reporting systems, security upgrades, and partnerships with advocacy groups to foster safer environments, though the scars of the scandal lingered as a reminder of the cost of complacency in the face of evil. Ana Costa emerged from the ordeal stronger than ever, her victim profile now that of a survivor and activist who channeled her pain into founding a support network for assault victims, pursuing her writing dreams with renewed passion and becoming a voice for change that resonated with young women everywhere. Her story, a testament to resilience amid unimaginable violation. Reactions continued to evolve with ongoing protests, ensuring that the memory of the incident fueled sustained vigilance against similar crimes, while media outlets produced documentaries and articles detailing the timeline of the assault, the evidence that brought justice, and the broader societal shifts it inspired. In the conclusion of this harrowing saga, the call for justice was answered not only through Freire's imprisonment, but through the collective awakening of a community determined to prevent future atrocities. The future updates promising continued monitoring of institutional reforms and support for survivors, like Anna, whose light refused to be dimmed by darkness. Years later, as Anna published her first book recounting her journey with unflinching honesty, the Academy renamed a scholarship in her honor, symbolizing redemption and the triumph of truth over the sick rampage that had once threatened to destroy so much, yet ultimately sparked a revolution in how society viewed and protected its most promising youth. The echoes of that classroom nightmare faded into history. But the lessons endured, reminding all that vigilance and courage could overcome even the most depraved abuses of power. In the pursuit of a safer, more just world, where educators uplifted rather than violated, and students like Ana could thrive without fear. The city of São Paulo moved forward, scarred but wiser. Its private academy forever changed by the events that began with one man's betrayal and ended with a collective stand for humanity's better angels. The story of Paulo Freire's rampage, serving as an eternal warning and a beacon of hope for those who refused to let monsters prevail.